With the best all-inclusive vacation deals to Mexico and the Caribbean, booking your getaway with Cheap Caribbean Vacations means you have more freedom to do your deal. Whether you enjoy snorkeling, endless margaritas, and more, or simply soak up the sun and sand in a tropical paradise, Cheap Caribbean Vacations has your deal for that. Plan and book the exact getaway you want at exactly the right price for you by using our exclusive Budget Beach Finder, or find a featured all-inclusive package to Jamaica and do your deal at cheapcaribbean.com.
Good afternoon. We are doing it live right here, 790 KABC, and the 4 o'clock hour, doing more at 4. We get right down to business here with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro, and just before the 790 KABC News Blitz at 5 with Randy Wang. Mottek on Money, live on the air, 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com, and your on-demand Mottek on Money podcast at KBC.com, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Mixed finish to a record-shattering week on Wall Street. All three of the major averages did rack up weekly gains, with the NASDAQ today finishing at an all-time high. Tech names continue to rally, and yes, including NVIDIA. The NASDAQ moving up 27 points to finish at 16,429. That is a record high close to close out a record-shattering week. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 hit record highs this week, but pulled back a bit today, with the Dow down, 305 points to settle at 39,476, and the S&P 500 gave back 7 at 5,234. NVIDIA moving higher again today to a record high of more than 3%, bringing its weekly gain to 7.4%. For the week, by the way, the Dow rose 2%, the S&P 500 jumped 2.3%, and the NASDAQ gained 2.9%. NVIDIA, by the way, also achieving its longest winning streak, basically on record, advancing for the 11th week in a row. Former President Trump set to make billions from social media. He's had a mixed week himself. The approval today by shareholders of a merger of former President Trump's social media platform Truth Social with a blank check company is set to more than double former President Trump's net worth, at least on paper. But while the estimated $3.2 billion windfall he might receive from the deal could eventually fatten the wallet, it might not come in time to help the former president out of his immediate financial crisis, needing to come up with a $164 million bond to appeal his corporate fraud conviction. And we're watching what's happening with that. This according to MarketWatch. Elsewhere in Washington today, in a 286 to 134 vote, the Republican-run House today approved a $1.2 trillion package of spending bills that prevents a partial government shutdown. I'll talk about that with someone who has a front row seat of what's happening there in Washington, and that is taxpayer advocate and watchdog Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform. Also, a congressional inquiry is now being opened into the use of AI surveillance by the IRS. United Airlines Holdings says the FAA would begin to review some of the airline's operations following a string of safety mishaps with the carrier. Also, did you see this? The FBI is now investigating the Alaska Airlines flight in January that saw a door plug blow off the plane mid-flight. And according to various sources, it told passengers they may be a possible victim of crime. It's a busy day for Los Angeles. The LA Busy Awards from the LA Business Federation were presented today by the LA Business Federation, LA BizFed. Among the honorees, the great founding chairman of LA BizFed, David Fleming. The new BizFed Pulse poll is also out. I'll talk about business this afternoon with Mark Wilbur, founding member and former chairman of the Los Angeles Business Federation, LA BizFed, chairman of Employers Group, and former associate dean of the USC Marshall School of Business. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works now. Joining us live, investment expert Brian Perry, chief investment strategist and portfolio manager at Mint Asset Management, author of the 25% Cash Machine. What a week, Brian. Thank you very much for stepping up to the plate here to wrap up a record-shattering week and a big news day today. Give us your assessment of where things stand here today.
Well, thank you, Frank. And it was a wonderful week here for stock owners, and that for people that were along this market, the stars really lined up. We received a double dose of bullish catalysts here. The first being the NVIDIA GTC conference was a big success in basically laying out the future of AI among other types of innovations that are coming to market here at a very rapid pace. And the second big catalyst was the Fed delivering a dot plot, meaning their plan for interest rates came in, as a nice surprise that they did not move their dot plot. They're still looking for 3 rate cuts by the end of the year. And this really got the market a 1-2 punch that it was looking for. And then you still had, led by big cap tech, but the breadth of the market, Frank, was very impressive here. Only real estate fell slightly on the week. You had 10 of 11 sectors finishing higher, and it was the best week of performance for the market for 2024. Now, the rally showing no signs of exhaustion at this point, and this is where I think it's really interesting here, because there was actually the biggest redemptions, the largest number of redemptions, $22 billion came out of the market leading up to the Fed's policy meeting here. So that money was wrong about the Fed, because they were betting that they would change their dot plot and push it out to maybe just 2 rate cuts or even less. That higher for longer was the narrative going into this. And that would have likely triggered some selling pressure had that been the case, but it was exactly the opposite, and the market took that announcement by Jerome Powell, and embraced it big time. So as it turns out, the market has a green light to trade higher, and I believe it will, right into the first quarter of earnings season that begins in earnest on April 12th when the money center banks report first quarter results, and that's led by J.P. Morgan. So today's pullback in the market here, which gave some back, it was on lower volume here, and I think the close is more of a digestion phase as from these last 2 big days. We had 2 big up days here going into this, and possibly a little trepidation about the Senate here tonight, whether or not they're going to be able to finish voting on this $1.2 trillion extension that you noted as a continuing budget resolution to avoid a partial government shutdown, and that deadline is midnight tonight. So some money came off the table here in front of that. Basically, but on the week though, what an incredible week here for big news. NVIDIA here really hit it out of the park at their show. Not only are they, their AI chips have been, the first wave of buyers have been the big internet cloud service providers and hyperscalers. There's a new wave of buyers that are stepping in that they'd mentioned at the show. And these are sovereign countries and global enterprises here that are, they mentioned Japan, Malaysia, South Korea, Sweden as current customers, with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates as likely buyers as well. So this is another catalyst, which is why NVIDIA kept pushing higher today against the down tape. And it looks like the stock definitely wants to trade, maybe another, 200-300 points higher from here. So this is very strong. And then you had new AI winners emerge from this week here too. Micron Technology, Broadcom, AVGO, Synopsys, SNPS, and Cadence Design, both of which CDNS, which both do software on chips. So this is broadening out in terms of not just the Mag 7, but other names are starting to become just as important from the standpoint of building out your AI portfolio, Frank.
The Magnificent Seven, not so magnificent. We just have pretty much the Magnificent One, NVIDIA, and Meta too, of course, on that 7 list, doing quite well. But Apple, on the flip side, never imagined a situation where the market would be hitting record highs and Apple not participating in that rally. In fact, it actually moved into a correction territory this week, a drop of 10% or more, right? Apple now at about 172 and change.
That's true. Apple ran into a buzzsaw with the Department of Justice here. They're going after them. They're suing Apple for basically making it very difficult for other people, like Android users and other types of applications that don't run smoothly on Apple, to communicate on the Apple platform here. So they're seeing that as a anti-competitive measure, and they're going to, and obviously they've got a lot of money. So the DOJ is going after them. Whether or not they write a big check, who knows? But it's going to be difficult to basically get Apple to release, make it wide open for everybody to use their platform. They have, but that's where it's headed right now, and that could lead to further pressure on Apple's stock going forward here. And on that note, at the same time, Apple and Google announced talks this week that Apple's going to start to use Google's Alphabet's Gemini AI model to power certain iPhone features. And that news really propelled Google shares higher, now trading near their 52-week high when it looked like it was down for the count. So mixed picture for Apple here, but I think it's you stay on the sideline. If you own it, hold it, but let this kind of play out.
On the air live with investment expert Brian Perry, and a reminder that cryptos go up and they go down. We saw Bitcoin down, about 8% this week here at last check. Bitcoin down about 1,000 now to 62,900 or so. And What about that crypto run up we saw to record highs for Bitcoin anyway, and now this pullback here? Crypto's doing what they do all over the place here.
Well, you certainly had that big move, and you still have the fork coming in here, the halving of Bitcoin here, somewhere between April 18th and the 22nd, when the mining of Bitcoin will be cut in half every 10 minutes. It'll go from 6.25 coins to 3.125 coins, and so from there, the supply is going to be less going forward here. I started buying Bitcoin back in here today, okay, at 63,000 here. I think that's going to hold support right in this level here. This is kind of where it made this big move, for a $10,000 move from 63 to 74.3. So I think this is a good place to get in front of this forking that's going to take place here next month, and I'm doing it through one of the spot Bitcoin ETFs. That's the iShares Bitcoin Trust. The symbol's IBIT. That's India Bravo India Tango. So I think it's okay, Frank, to, if you don't own it, maybe take a partial position here. But I think Bitcoin still moves to 80,000 or higher, during the course of the year.
All right. Ethereum also saw a big ride on the upside. That one's around 3,300 or so. We see BlackRock launching a tokenized asset fund for Ethereum. So that's also getting new attention. What about Ethereum here, and your thoughts about the rest of the crypto space at this point?
Well, Ethereum's pulled right back to a key 50-day moving average right here. I think this is a very interesting pullback here. It's a bigger pullback than what took place in Bitcoin for sure. That's because you've got other coins like Solana, which are competing in that same utility space, the blockchain space that Ethereum has basically dominated for all this time. Now you got Solana coming up as maybe a hotter crypto altcoin as opposed to Ethereum. So it's getting spread out. What the utility coins are starting to take hold here. Cardano is another one that people like to talk about quite a bit. But I think the three that dominate now are certainly Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana coming up fast. So I would use this pullback here to actively get involved. And the other thing was this too. You had the dollar have a nice bump here this week. The dollar traded higher here. And that's when you see that happen here, and you see fear coming out of the market, because there's a lot of fear going into a lot of trepidation going into the Fed meeting. That's where you see the currencies pull back. And also you had the Swiss bank today lower interest rates for the first time. They're the first central bank to lower interest rates, which beat down the Swiss franc itself and bolstered the dollar higher. So you had gold and Bitcoin pulling back here because those are considered counter levers or to a weak dollar, and so the dollar had a good week, and therefore you had a lot of pressure come off of gold and Bitcoin here. But I think that's temporary, and I think it's a good time to leg in.
From the blockchain to gold chain, we see gold right now down about $18 today to $2,166 and change. It had hit a record high recently. Silver is still well below its all-time high, hovering just below $25 an ounce. What do you see ahead for those two?
Well, I think gold is certainly, you want to, on this, whatever kind of pullback we get, I look at the GLD as the largest traded ETF here, and that's trading at around $200. It traded at just 204. Not much. It broke out at 195, you want to call it, and so you're not going to get much from here. It's you might get 197 where its 20-day moving average comes into play, and I think that's really where people should get long some gold here, because we still have, we're piling on debt to the tune of, $100 billion every, $1 trillion every 100 days, so in new debt, on the federal debt. So I just think until that course, of conversation changes, then I think that gold is becoming, a real core holding for those that want to say, I want something outside of Bitcoin because I don't understand it or I don't trust it or just don't want to trade it, into something that's, that protects you against the any kind of weakness in the large fiat currencies of the developed countries out there, the G7.
All right, on the air live with Brian Perry. At this point, Brian, where are you putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
Well, after the first day of the NVIDIA conference, I started buying some more of NVIDIA. I just think that the stock here currently, closing today around 941 is going to 1100, and I think the UBS analyst is spot on when he raised his prices to. They're going to earn $35 to $40 here in a couple of years, so the stock only trades at 40 times earnings, growing at 75 to 100% top line. So there's room to run still for that name. Supermicro, they make the servers, because the new chips that NVIDIA it came out with this week. They run really hot, so they have to be liquid cooled, and so therefore Supermicro makes the servers that are liquid cooled, and that so that it manages that kind of power. We're talking about billions of processors going off every minute, and so that looks good. SMCI, it's another very, very hot stock. It's been up huge. Dell Technologies, DELL, it also makes servers for AI, and they laid out their AI strategy here recently. The stock has had a nice pullback here, about 15 points, so people ought to take a look at that. Buying back into more, I own it, but I'm adding to my position in Novo Nordisk, NVO, which is the Wegovy maker, for weight loss drugs, and the FDA approved Wegovy for cardiovascular symptoms and diseases also. Block looks good. Square, that's run by Jack Dorsey. That's pulled back nicely. CrowdStrike is the new king, I believe, in cybersecurity. That's pulled back off its high, and IBM with their Watson looks good too. And in the fixed income area, just one recommendation here, because if the Fed is going to start lowering rates, and I believe they are, then people need to start locking in, because the money markets are, they're paying 5.25% now, but they're not going to be paying that at the end of the year. One high yield play, Frank, is the BlackRock High Yield Corporate Bond Fund, and that pays 9.6% and spits out a monthly dividend to buyers here. So you can start to buy into the high yield bond market here and get almost a 10% yield. That looks great right here. And then certainly coming off, Nike, they missed their numbers here. Stock's breaking down. Lululemon broke down today badly, right below its 200 movers, as they missed and guided lower. And so that looks tough. And then if people get a chance here, if Chipotle pulls back, they announced a 50-for-1 stock split this week. So that's the first time we've seen a big company like that pull off a big split. And I think if that pulls back, then people ought to look at that as a great leader in the QSR space. And lastly, I took a nice big profit in Textron, which is a big defense contractor where they were approved to let the Osprey get back into service here for the Navy. So that made a big run higher, and it's just never hurts to take a profit.
All right, and I haven't heard IBM mention it in quite some time. You just mentioned it, also known as Big Blue. Looks like it pulled back a bit today to 190 and change. It has participated somewhat in this year's rally, up 17% since the start of the year, and actually up 52% over the past year. So IBM suddenly coming to life along with the other tech names.
Yeah, it really did, because when they announced their numbers here, the stock just made a nice move. From around I'll call it 165 to 195. In the course of a day and a half. So it needs time to vacillate in here and regroup, but it's held up around 190 here. It's held most of its gains. It traded as high as 199 at the high, and now it's just hugging this 20-day average here. That's why I'm buying more of it in here. I think the stock moves higher. The Watson AI story they've got there is very good, and they've got a really good CEO. He's doing a great job moving away from the legacy businesses and putting together a very strong future built on AI. So I think IBM is a great comeback story here.
All right, what about the airlines and what about Boeing? On that news I presented earlier about United saying the FAA would begin to review some of its airline operations, and then the report that the FBI is investigating the Alaska Airlines flight in January that had that door plug blow off the plane mid-flight. So a lot going on there.
Yes, there is, and you look for price action on bad news, and when you see Boeing move from 180 to 188 in the midst of this, these stories, these news releases that are fairly negative, then you wonder, okay, how much? Because this is one stock that smart money wants to own at the right price, because it's a duopoly out there. It's Airbus and Boeing that dominate the industry, and at some point, Boeing will be a great buy. And their order book will just will soar. But right now, it's in a downtrend, and it's right at the 180 held. It held earlier in the year and then back in November, and it held again here this week. You just watch the news flow. But when you start to see a stock trade up against bad news, then you and under good accumulation here too, good money flow. So long-term money. People that want to own the stock for the next 10 or 20 years are it looks like they're starting to leg into it down here, Frank, while there's, quote, blood on the street.
All right, Brian. Well, thank you very much for wrapping up with a big week. We'll let you get back to the champagne here. Investment expert Brian Perry, Chief Investment Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Mint Asset Management at mintassetmanagement.com, author of the 25% Cash Machine. Brian, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Always great, Frank. It's been a great week, and let's just keep it going. Thank you much.
Enjoy. All right. Look forward to speaking with you again next week on Mottek on Money here in 790 KABC. Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are the ones on standby ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that was not your fault. Whether it's an accident, car accident, slip, trip, fall, any kind of personal injury accident, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if necessary, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are all part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process, and the team at Fielding Law are the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Dweezil Zappa to the Orpheum Theater coming up on August 3rd. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com, and right now caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Big winners on Wall Street this week. A bit of a pullback today for both the Dow and the S&P 500. The Dow down 305 at 39,476 after achieving a record high earlier in the week. The S&P 500 down 7 at 5,234. It's just below its all-time high. The NASDAQ, though, moved higher today, up another 27 points to 16,483, and that is a record high close to cap off a record-shattering week. For the week, the Dow was up 2%, the S&P 500 up 2.3%, and the NASDAQ gained 2.9%. The yield in the 10-year note, which impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, has eased to 4.20%. Gold down $18.20 at $2,166.50 an ounce. Silver hovering just below $25 an ounce. Oil down 26 cents at $80.81 a barrel. In the crypto space, we see a Bitcoin down about 1,000 now at 62,900 or so. Right now, Ethereum down 30 at 3,285, and Doge at 15 cents. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KABC. Mottek of Money continues here in 790 KABC. Record-shattering week for stocks. Big week on Wall Street as well as on Main Street here in Los Angeles. It was a busy day for business and civic leaders in Los Angeles today. The LA BizFed Busy Awards were presented by the Los Angeles Business Federation, LA BizFed. Among the honorees, the founding chairman of LA BizFed, David Fleming. The new BizFed Business Pulse poll is also out. A lot of buzz in the business world here in Los Angeles. LA BizFed serves as the voice of business in Los Angeles County, and joining us live now is Mark Wilbur, founding member and former chairman of Los Angeles County Business Federation, LA BizFed, chairman of Employers Group, and former associate dean of the USC Marshall School of Business. Mark Wilbur, big day today. Tell us about the wonderful Busy Awards ceremony, first of all.
It's a busy day today, no pun intended. And there's a few things I'd love to focus on the Busy Awards for sure, because it's a really fun event. It was hosted this year, the Japan American National Museum in downtown Los Angeles. It was absolutely a packed house for sure. So the key winners to me today was Advocate of the Year was Brisa Sotelo Vargas from Valero Energy. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to meet her before, Frank, but she is an extraordinary leader in our city. She's involved in so many things. And, of course, she's a member of my beloved Trojan family from USC. So, I had to give a little fight on for her. But the one that is also really stands up above everything else, got a standing ovation, somebody that I consider a mentor, a friend, and actually one of the greatest leaders in the history of our great city, is the award that David Fleming got, and that is the Richard Riordan Legacy Award. It was, it's the second time it's been given. He really is the founder. He's the godfather, as we refer to him, of BizFed. He had the initial idea while he was serving on the board of directors at LA Chamber. But as he pointed out today, it's hard to get that done if you don't have people to help execute it. And leadership of the people that helped found it, and Tracy Hernandez, of course, who is the spearhead of the whole franchise, really is something special that they've created. They've really created the voice of business in a way that I would not be surprised to see other major cities around the United States replicate this in some fashion, because it really has been working. It creates a good relationship, a good working partnership with the public affairs of government and business, and it tries to settle things in a way that are productive for everybody involved. So David Fleming, hats off to him. If you know him, send him a shout out, send him a celebratory email, text message. He really deserves it. He's really one of the special people in our city. I have a couple others to call out if I've got time. I've got the one this year. I love this. They have one called the Common Sense Award. I mean, it sounds like, somebody, didn't have common sense maybe in the past or whatever. I don't think that's the case here at all. It was given to California Senator Josh Newman, very funny, engaging speaker when he accepted the award. But it's the Common Sense Award because, he's very practical. He's brought together both parties together to try and create initiatives and progress on tough issues in our state that are, typically partisan versus being bipartisan. So, he gets a big shout out there. And then another one, Business of the Year, Tejon Ranch. I don't think that's a big surprise. Their big centennial project, when you start looking at the zero carbon development that they're doing and all of the future plans that they're doing at Tejon Ranch, it reminds me very much, Frank, of the Irvine Company back in their early days, where, they had a lot of land to develop and a lot of opportunity to bring housing and shelter to people, but also services and business, and it's going to create thousands and thousands of jobs. So it was really a great day today. Of course, I got to call out Rich Lambros, who won a Big Lift Award. Andy Henderson, who also won a Big Lift Award. He's from the Henderson Law Firm, and Rich Lambros is from the Southern California Leadership Council. All fantastic people. There's a whole other list here, as you can imagine. You can go to the BizFed site and see all the winners, but those are the ones off the top of my head.
Great names, big names here in LA business. Delighted to hear that. And, of course, David Fleming, who along with you and Tracy Hernandez and others initially formed LA BizFed back during the financial crisis days, and what a organization it's become. So we do join the chorus of congratulations to David Fleming, who received the Richard J. Riordan Award, named for former LA Mayor Richard Riordan, who departed last year. Must have been quite a special day there. I'm heartbroken that I was not able to join everybody there today, but I'm elated to hear that it was such a wonderful occasion. And the other big news, LA BizFed has put out the BizFed Business Pulse poll, right? Mark, maybe you can highlight what is the number one issue now for LA businesses here.
Gosh, some of it will be a surprise, some of it not really a surprise, to be honest. Leading the pack once again, it dropped for a couple of years down to number 2, but taxes and fees still plague our city. It's a very expensive place to do business if you are a business. There's just so many ways that they're taking off at the top. And guess what that translates into? That translates into the cost of merchandise, the cost of the food and the products and everything else that is delivered in the city of Los Angeles. So that's a big one. Crime right on its heels at 70%. 70% of the respondents, said these two issues, taxes, crime, and not surprisingly, right behind that is homelessness. All three of the biggest issues that are plaguing our city. You and I have talked about these issues endless for the last 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know. I've lost track at this point. But we've got to start making some headway in these areas. We've got to have some practical solutions that help us chip away at these issues. A couple other one other quick item, Frank, is the number of business leaders that were surprised. A lot of them expected inflation. They expected it to be expensive, but 73% of the leaders that responded were surprised at just how high the expense hit. just how big the inflation has been in the city of Los Angeles. I thought that was interesting. So it's even surprising people that have their pulse on what those costs should be. But even for them, bringing in, materials and goods and things like that, it's even surprised businesses how expensive it is to operate today in America.
On the air live with Mark Wilbur. Mark, that is absolutely fantastic. I remember thinking back here, remember the first BizFed Pulse poll when you guys first were formed during the financial crisis. The number one thing on the list was lending when it was impossible to get credit back in those days during the financial crisis. So thank goodness that seems to be off the table now.
Well, and you think about the timing of our first poll, 2008, when the financial crisis hit, right? So, all the lending literally disappeared in front of our eyes while people were taking the poll. So not a total surprise. It's, there's a lot more to cover here, Frank. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other issues. I mean, the government scores on how satisfied and unsatisfied people are, I don't think are a total surprise. I wish our officials would listen a little more closely because people are really upset. I mean, when the city is leading the pack, from, for everything from U.S. Congress and state legislature and Newsom and everything, the city is leading the pack at a 25% satisfaction rate. That's the best score.
Isn't that something?
That tells you
I wish we had
just how happy people are.
Yeah, well, mood certainly has improved over the years with the capital markets kissing record highs this week. So it must have been a great celebration there overall, Mark. And thanks for joining us here to share all that important information with us. And certainly look forward to getting you back on the air as soon as possible to go over some more of those subjects that were surveyed to the LA business community, all very, very important subjects. And Mark Wilbur, founding member and former chairman of the Los Angeles County Business Federation, LA BizFed, the voice of business in Los Angeles, chairman of Employers Group and former associate dean of the USC Marshall School of Business. I'll give you a fight on now, Mark, and thank you very much for joining us live for this afternoon.
Thanks for having me on, Frank. Always a joy.
Have a great weekend, and right out to the freeways now on 790 KABC. Mottek Money continues here in 790 KABC Rockin' Week for the financial markets. In Washington, meanwhile, we got a 286 to 134 vote. The Republican-run House today approving a $1.2 trillion package of spending bills that prevents a partial government shutdown. The drama continues in Washington. Now the focus is on the U.S. Senate as a midnight shutdown deadline approaches. Let's bring in our taxpayer advocate and watchdog Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, who's got a ringside seat there. Also a congressional inquiry being opened into the use of AI surveillance by your friends at the IRS. Grover Norquist, thank you very much for taking the call. First of all, give us an update on what's happening there in Washington.
Well, a couple of interesting and cheerful things. They voted to condemn the idea of a carbon tax and to say that they'll never do it. Every single Republican, minus one guy from Pennsylvania, voted no carbon tax ever. 10 Democrats actually voted against the idea of imposing a carbon tax on the American people. So a majority of the House of Representatives says we're not doing a carbon tax. So that's not a bad thing. And the Republican Speaker of the House said, now some of you are worried because there was this idea put forward by Mitt Romney that we should have a commission to suggest tax increases to fix the deficit instead of spending restraint. And he said that is not happening. We could have a commission to come up with ideas for spending restraint. We're not having a commission to try and push tax increases. So those are two cheerful things going on the floor, and they're slowly getting the budgets done, House and Senate in different places. That's taking a while.
What do you think is going to happen tonight?
Oh, what's going to happen? I don't know. We'll find. We'll find out. They keep moving things through. Yeah, the House has passed. The House has passed a law to continue much of the Trump tax cuts. The Senate is still looking at that and hasn't decided that these are the full expensing for business investment and R&D. Very important to get done. I don't quite understand why the Senate is dragging its feet, but I hope that they will join the House and make those tax cuts that are phasing down, continue them for a few years forward so that we can then make all of the Trump tax cuts permanent next year.
So important for the business audience listeners here. Now,
yes.
You're also a IRS watchdog, and tell us what about this congressional inquiry we understand is being opened into the use of AI, artificial intelligence surveillance, by the tax folks there at the IRS.
Well, this is a very important thing to start having a conversation about, because the one thing we've found out about this IRS over the last decades, but over the last 3 years in particular, they really want access to everything in your life. They wanted to go through and get the ins and outs of everything that goes in and out of your bank, of everything that goes in and out of your Venmo. And unless you could prove that, that it wasn't income, and which means you better keep some pretty interesting files, they were going to, and they would have to have access to it. They wanted access to everything about you. Of course, once they have it, we know that they have a problem, that people hack the IRS so that your financial data would not be secure. We also know they have a bad habit of taking people's data and giving it to political organizations that attack people. And that happened to a bunch of high-income people, including Bloomberg, who you think would be immune to that kind of attack, but he did run against Biden, and as punishment, the IRS leaked his stuff to a left-wing group, which can use it to harass him, all of his financial data. So why would you not be worried about what AI could do to suck up data from people and hand it to the IRS, which then makes it available to too much of the world?
Robots taking over there, too. That's a very big subject, and hopefully we'll have more conversations about that, Grover. Thank you very much for that important update. We'll be watching what's happening as they burn the midnight oil again. The U.S. Senate now considering this spending package, and whether there'll be a partial government shutdown after midnight tonight remains to be seen. So high drama continues there. Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform, thank you very much for taking the call live with us here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much. And recapping a record-shattering week for the stock market, in which we've seen the Dow move of 2%, the S&P 500 of 2.3%, and the NASDAQ up 2.9% for the week. The NASDAQ stands at a record high to close out this record-shattering week, up 27 points today at 16,483. The Dow pulled back from its record high, down 305, and the S&P 500 slipped 7 from its record high. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back Monday at 4 for Mottek on Money on 790 KBC.
Hey everybody, this is Dan Bespris, host of Fantasy NBA Today, a daily fantasy basketball podcast. We cover every box score from every game, every day. Plus bonus shows on buy low opportunities, players to stash, schedule analysis, and really anything you could need to smash your league into deliciously tiny pieces.
Catch the Fantasy NBA Today podcast, part of the Believe Network, on YouTube or wherever you listen.